Good morning. We want to welcome and recognize everyone who's here. I want to recognize Mr. Ed Quatrevaux, our Inspector General, Mr. Howard Schwartz, the Assistant Inspector General. To my left is Deputy Chief Arlinda Westbrook, who heads up our Public Integrity Bureau. We also have Chief Robert Barty of our Field Operations Bureau. Deputy Chief Randy Mushat over our Investigation and Support Bureau. Today with us also is Lieutenant Gervis Allison, who commands our Special Victim Section. We have Commander Darrell Albert, who heads up our Criminal Investigations Division. Today, the NOPD stands with our Office of Inspector General to present the results of a new report with some disturbing allegations. The report is a collaborative effort with our Public Integrity Bureau. We've worked with the Office of Inspector General over the past several months to ensure Mr. Quatrevaux's office had access to everything it needed to do a thorough investigation. NOPD officers take a sworn duty to protect and serve the residents and visitors of this community, and we take that very seriously. The mayor, this team, and I are committed to getting this right. We're reforming the police department from the top to the bottom with better hiring, better training, and better equipment. And while these things take time, we are impatient. We want to root out problems as we find them. And so right now, I want to turn it over to the Office of Inspector General to discuss his report. Then I'll come back and discuss actions we've taken in this instance and measures we've put in place to make sure that this does not happen again.
Thank you, Chief. We're announcing the results of an OIG investigation into the actions of 5 NOPD detectives assigned to investigate sexual assault complaints. As the Chief said, our work was done in collaboration with the Public Integrity Bureau and with the support of the NOPD leadership. In May 2014, the New Orleans Office of Inspector General audited the police department's reporting of rapes and found 46% of rape cases sampled were misclassified, most as miscellaneous or unfounded. NOPD did not agree with the findings. OIG investigators reviewed the auditor's random sample of 90 cases and found 23 reports that were problematic. The OIG then conducted an investigation, and as said, the Public Integrity Bureau of the NOPD provided material assistance. The investigation covered all of the 1,290 cases of 5 officers assigned to the rape squad over a 3-year period from 2011 to 2013. Investigators found that there were no supplemental reports in 86% of the cases, and we have identified 271 cases that need to be reviewed and investigated. These failures do have serious human consequences for all, and 15 involve children. These revelations suggest an indifference to our citizens that won't be tolerated, and they offend all of the good police officers who work diligently to enforce the law. Assistant IG for Investigations Howard Schwartz will brief you on the details of the investigation, and then he'll be followed by the Chief and Deputy Chief Westbrook. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Let me take a few minutes to explain what we did, why we did it, and how we did it. As the Inspector General said, we identified 23 reports from a completely random sample that our audit division did back in May. And we found some, as he said, some disturbing things. Let me tell you some of the things we found with a random sample. 7 of the reports we reviewed had no supplemental reports, meaning there were no documentation whatsoever by the detective of doing any further investigative work other than the initial report. 4 of the reports had information contained in a report that was materially different than either the laboratory or medical report showed. For example, a detective wrote in a report that he checked with Louisiana State Police DNA laboratory in Baton Rouge, which was negative for a sexual assault kit that was sent there. We then checked with LSP DNA laboratory and found that NOPD never submitted that sexual assault kit. We went beyond that. Then we checked with Central Evanston Property and found that sexual assault kit was never submitted to the lab. 6 of the reports were backdated, meaning the Office of Inspector General asked the police department to provide 6 supplemental reports that were missing from original reports that they already had submitted. We then checked with the IT department, who found that those reports were created sometimes 2-3 years later on the same day right after, or a short time after, the IG asked for those reports by 2 of these 5 detectives. So that's what we found by a random sample. We said if we found these things by a random sample, what are we going to find if we do a systematic targeted 100% across the board, looking at everything these 5 detectives did during a 3-year period? And that's what we did. So we went to NOPD. At the time it was Chief Surpass, Deputy Chief Arlinda Westbrook, met with them. And I got to tell you, I don't work for the police department, so I can tell you the truth. When we met with them, it was 100% cooperation from day one. It continues with Chief Harrison. It was never any pushback. It wasn't denial. It wasn't to try to prevent us from doing anything. We could not have done this, and I'm going to explain what we did without their cooperation. They gave us absolute access to everything. That's the only way we got this done. So what we did was we asked the PD to identify, PIB specifically, to identify every sex crime call for service that these 5 detectives handled in a 3-year period. And they did. They identified 1,290 that these 5 detectives handled. Now, there's 3 places we can go to get information that we can analyze from the police for these reports. One is the CAD system, the computer-aided dispatch. That's 911 call center. Every time somebody calls them, whether by cell phone or police radio, that creates a log and a history called an incident recall report. So we can get information from there if comments are made. 2, it's their NOPD's internal databases, EPR, electronic police report, DTS, document tracking system. And 3 is sex crimes itself, their files. Police department gave us unlimited access to those things. When we needed to go to sex crimes, we did it unannounced with their cooperation. We showed up there, so no one knew. We pulled the files along with a lieutenant from PIB. We went through it ourselves, so we had unfettered access to everything. So from those 1,290 original reports, it doesn't mean there's 1,290 sex crimes running around out there. It does not. It means there were 1,290 potential sex crime calls for service. It takes a police officer or a detective to investigate to determine if they were in fact sex crimes. Here's what we found. From the 1,290 potential sex crimes, 840 of those, 65%, were designated as Signal 21 miscellaneous, with no reports at all, nothing. From the incident recall report, we can get the time, the date, the location, officer badge number, unit number, and occasionally, sometimes, a victim's name. That's it. No comments, nothing. For 840 of those, we couldn't evaluate. Let me state that another way. For these 5 detectives, and I'm only speaking about the 5 detectives, it's not across the board, because we only looked at these 5. For 65% of their work, for 3 years, no one can evaluate that. Not us, the IG, not the police department. There is no record other than making it a 21 and the things I told you about. So we start with 1,290, throw out 840, we're left with 450 reports that we could analyze. Meaning there's 450 reports of something written that we could review. Now, almost all of those 450 have an original report or initial report. And an original report for sex crimes is very vague, and it's vague on purpose so they don't identify potential victims. So an original report will read something like, a known female was sexually assaulted at a known location, and that's it. Then almost every time they'll put further information will be provided via a supplemental report, or further investigation will be documented by a supplemental report. So for those 400, here's the numbers right here on a chart, but no, I'm sorry. If you want to put I didn't know you had that one up. For those 450 reports, 271, or 60%, had no supplemental reports. Let me put that another way. For 60% of these 3 detectives' work, the 5 detectives' work for 3 years, 60% of the time, there is no documentation of any further investigative efforts whatsoever, other than that brief initial report I told you about. Now, we were able to evaluate these 450 reports, and here's what we found. From those reports, these 5 detectives presented 105 cases to the district attorney's office. Out of those 105 cases, the district attorney's office accepted 74 of those cases. Now, the district attorney's office should be commended for this, because we reviewed the district attorney files as well. And even though these 5 detectives, more than 60% of the time, did not present the district attorney with supplemental reports, with documentation of investigation, the district attorney office on their own got those reports. They interviewed victims and witnesses, and they got medical records, hospital records, etc. And to their credit, they were able to prosecute 74 of those. Now, the chart shows the breakdown of the percentages. It's a total of 60% for these 5 detectives for the lack of documentation of investigative efforts. Now, I got to tell you, even though these 5 detectives did know further investigation was done. Work still was done by other people, not these 5 detectives. NOPD's crime scene techs still did work and did reports. Hospitals still did work. ER doctors wrote reports. Sane sexual assault nurse examiners wrote reports. Forensic interviewers from Children's Hospital wrote reports. DNA labs still processed evidence. So things were done, just not by these 5 detectives. Now, let me just take a couple minutes, just give you a couple examples of what we found besides just statistics. An infant was brought to the emergency room with a skull fracture. That's what the initial report said. That's it. No other information from NOPD, from this detective. The medical report, though, says the ER nurse wrote, and I quote, "I suspect non-accidental trauma." Nothing was done. There was no further reports. Another infant was brought, separate incident, to the emergency room with a skull fracture, separate incident. The doctor found that skull fracture, and then found on an infant, found a prior skull fracture as well. The detective wrote in the report, there were no cause for criminal action. Close that. Even though the mother changed her story several times. Another example was a juvenile, very young juvenile, brought into the emergency room because they were suspected of sexual assault on the juvenile. The detective closed the case for lack of evidence. Medical report, the forensic interview. A forensic interview is done by a trained professional who is trained to elicit information specifically from children regarding physical and sexual abuse. The forensic interviewer wrote in the report that the child did give specific instances of sexual and physical abuse by a known offender that lived in the house, and that wrote in the report that the offender was a registered sex offender. But there was no further investigation, no supplemental reports. And finally, Detective D, we didn't use their names in the report. The DA's office requested that we did not. So we referred to them as Detective A, B, C, D, and E. Detective D told at least 3 different people that Detective D did not believe in simple rape, did not believe simple rape should be a crime. Detective D handled 11 simple rapes during the 3-year period we reviewed, presented 1 to the district attorney's office. Let me give you an example of just one of those cases. The victim went to the hospital to have a sexual assault nurse examination, a SANE exam. This is a sexual assault kit, SAK. The sexual assault kit was collected. Physical evidence was collected off this victim. There's no report by Detective D. There's no supplemental report. So everything I'm telling you comes from other areas. The SANE nurse, the sexual assault nurse examiner, wrote in her report that the victim said that the offender was sending her threatening text messages. We found no documentation that Detective D attempted to get phone records, text messages, anything of that sort. In fact, there's no supplemental report, so there's no evidence of any further investigation. When we checked with Sex Crimes Unit and looked at their logbook, they log in all their item numbers, sex crimes. By the item number for this case, Detective D wrote, "I will not send this kit to LSP DNA Laboratory. Sex was consensual." And the kit still sits, or did at the time, at Central Evanston Property. It wasn't submitted. Now finally, I've mentioned LSP DNA Laboratory in Baton Rouge. They maintain the CODIS system. CODIS is the Combined DNA Index System. That's where all the DNA in the state goes for analysis. As of October 3rd, last time we checked, when a positive identification is made off DNA, it's called a CODIS hit. And a CODIS hit can be positive for a crime scene or for an individual. And when they get a CODIS hit, LSP DNA lab will send a letter of notification to the police department, NOPD. As of October 3rd, they had 53 open CODIS hits for sex crime related matters. Now, after all this, when we met with the police department, specifically Chief Harrison, Chief Westbrook, when we found the incidents with the children, there were 15 juveniles that may have still been in the same home. We couldn't tell because there's no reports. There was no supplemental reports. You have an incident report, initial, and nothing else. So we couldn't tell its potential. There was a potential that there still could be a danger to the children. Chief Harrison will explain what they did with that. But we didn't wait for this report to come out. When we found it on October 3rd, we turned it over to PIB immediately. And then in meeting with them, everything I told you about and everything that's in our report, we've provided to the police department. We gave it to them on October 15th. And in meeting with them, knowing them, as working with them in the past, I feel very confident that this will not happen again. They will put things in place, and the Chief is here to tell you what they will put in place to do that. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Howard. As your Chief of Police, I am deeply disturbed by these allegations, as I've already said. It's our duty to protect and serve. We're going to take that seriously. In this case, it appears that these 5 detectives may have neglected their duty, and even further. As a police department, we will not tolerate it. Sex crimes are among the most heinous crimes we can investigate at the NOPD. Victims do not have time to wait, and they deserve better. PIB collaborated with the OIG to provide all the requested documentation for review, and they immediately follow up on all of the cases involving child abuse allegations. All of the children involved in this alleged incident are safe at this time, and we've double-checked that to make sure that they're safe, and measures were put in place to ensure that they were either removed from the home, it was safe, or those people were put in touch with social services to provide that safety. Due to the nature of the investigations that they've handled, all 5 detectives have been transferred. 3 of the detectives were transferred prior to me being appointed as chief. So we launched the PIB investigation and are building a case. We're conducting a comprehensive review of all investigations handled by these detectives during their assignment in the special victim section. If criminal or administrative violations are discovered, we will take immediate disciplinary action up to termination. I've also appointed a special task force to independently review each case. Any case found to have been not properly investigated will be assigned for a thorough investigation. We have a system in place to root out problems early and to make sure that this does not happen again. We've also replaced the leadership at all levels, starting with the Bureau Deputy Superintendent, the Division Commander. We added a Special Victim Section Commander at the rank of Lieutenant who's here with us today. We've implemented new standardized investigative checklists that require supervisor verification, and we're sending a minimum of 10 sexual assault kits a week for DNA testing to avoid a backlog. Our Special Victim Section Commander and supervisors are required to attend all district attorney sex crimes charge conferences. We have supervisory oversight improvements that are in place in the criminal case management system. We develop sexual assault response team protocols that incorporate national best practices on police responses to sexual assaults. This protocol enables NOPD to connect the victims with service providers, including the New Orleans Family Justice Center and the Metropolitan Center for Women and Children. As you know, the department is undergoing a comprehensive reform as part of our federal consent decree. Over the past 4 years, we've been pushing forward a cultural shift at the department on handling domestic violence and sexual assault crimes. That the consent decree outlines specific policy training and techniques to prevent gender-biased policing, and we're actively working to implement these measures. We cleared a backlog of 800 sexual assault kits, and we're implementing an integrated domestic violence protocol with the Family Justice Center, and we've conducted over 2,700 hours of training on this very issue. Just last month, we announced that we're taking it a step further with the Blueprint for Safety initiative, working with federal, state, and local partners more than ever before to ensure coordinated criminal justice response. We've created measures of accountability to ensure complete and accurate reports and supervisory accountability. And we're improving victims' experiences with the criminal justice response. We will begin training all the NOPD leadership next week, followed by training of all patrol officers with our blueprint for safety. We will also incorporate this training into our year-round in-service training as well as online training for every member of the department. I want to be clear, this report should not take away from the progress we've made and the hundreds of officers who are doing incredible and great work every day. PIB has launched an investigation into these 5 officers based on the initial allegations from this report. If criminal or administrative violations are discovered, as I said, we will take immediate disciplinary action up to termination. I'm committed to getting this right. This entire team is committed to getting this right, and we're continuing to rebuild the trust between the department and the community. Thank you. At this time, we'll entertain any questions that you might have.
The report shows that on average, each of these detectives submitted or filed 1 supplemental report per month per detective. How can they go 3 years with supervisors looking over that and sort of get away with that rate of?
That's a very good question, and going forward, that will not be tolerated. But to answer that question, we actually identified that early on, even before I became chief. And 3 of those detectives, because of their lack of work or inadequate work, were actually transferred out. And we had 2 supervisors moved out prior to me becoming the chief. So those deficiencies were actually identified early, even before I became chief. And then we doubled down on it when I became chief, taking a deep dive to make sure that we look at every detective and every supervisor in that unit.
Chief Surpass said last year that he had replaced the leadership at the sex crimes unit to address some of the complaints about, treating these reports as something to disprove as opposed to trying to prove a case. What's the difference now? You're saying you've made more replacement. I mean, those are people who are brought in to address that. How do we know that we're not just in a cycle?
What we're doing now is not just replacing the leadership, but we're changing the culture of the police department. And with that change, we're changing the culture and the institutional culture of that unit, so that the sex crimes, child abuse, and domestic violence investigators understand the seriousness of what the allegations are. They understand the complexity. They understand that justice must be served. These victims are looking for justice, and that the system must work. And so we're building measures of accountability to ensure that the officers are performing at a high level. And we've built the machine to tell us that the supervisors are catching that, and that the lieutenants are understanding that the sergeants are catching it or not catching it. And then we have systems to let us know what we need to do about it when they don't. All the way up to the commander of the unit, all the way up to the deputy chief, and then to me, that we know who is doing what when, and if they're not doing it, we know exactly what to do about it.
These 5 detectives, you said were transferred, obviously not working in that unit. Where are they now within the NOPD?
Those 5 detectives are assigned away from the special victim section. They are all in the Field Operations Bureau on patrol assignments. And as a result of this internal investigation at the Public Integrity Bureau, we're doing a deep dive. The moment Chief Westbrook's team identifies that there are allegations beyond neglect of duty that may cross over into criminal violations, we will then reassign those investigators to a desk duty and take them out of patrol until the completion of that internal criminal investigation.
Seems that the IT, what they did looking at IT and backdating of some of these supplemental reports, what is the disciplinary action for that? And that would seem to be sort of transparent.
It is. That goes to our transparency. And so with regard to the Signal 21, which is the classification for a miscellaneous complaint here in the city of New Orleans, that's actually the policy for complaints that really are miscellaneous, things that don't fall within any other category. With regard to backdating these complaints, the internal investigation has to tell us whether or not they actually intended to backdate or there was some bad police practice by which they put the wrong date on it, because what we're trying to figure out is if they put the date that they were working on the investigation or the date the incident actually occurred. So there are 2 things there. There's a training issue and a policy issue. that we have to make sure our policies are real clear to every member of the department as to what we should do and when, and that if intentional backdating was done, would that fall under a criminal violation?
David. On that intentional backdating question, if I could ask Mr. Schwartz, it says in the report Detectives C and E did this, and separately says that Detective C on the same day in 2013 filed these reports that were backdated, and then separately Detective E on the same day in 2013. Were Detective C and E doing that on the same day?
Yes.
Single day?
Yes. Yep.
So, I mean, doesn't that tell you, Chief Harrison, that this was a coordinated effort to make up for the fact that the IG was asking for these reports and they didn't have them?
It appears that way. And so we're not running from it. We're not hiding it. The investigation will be thorough. It will be transparent. And Chief Westbrook will make a recommendation to me the moment we find that this was not a mistake and that this was intentional. And we're very serious about this. And those recommendations will lead to discipline. We won't tolerate it, all the way up to termination if it warrants it.
Are you continuing the you lie, you die policy?
Those are not my words. We want to make sure that every officer tells the truth. We want to make sure officers do not circumvent or do anything to undermine internal investigations, and that they're truthful when speaking to supervisors about facts and circumstances regarding the work they do. And so if an officer is untruthful and then we document that, the officer becomes unreliable, the officer becomes ineffective as a police officer, even in testifying in court. And so our policy is that if they're untruthful and we can prove that, and that it's not a mistake in an answer, but it's actually a purposeful untruthfulness, we're going to take that very seriously. And so they become ineffective with the police department.
I was going to ask you, you called the allegation disturbing, so why are any of these 5 individuals doing anything with the NOPD at this point, pending the outcome of the investigation? And 2, why haven't they been named at this point?
Well, number one, it's an allegation, and the internal investigation has begun. And so we're taking a deep dive into this. And so this was the Inspector General's investigation, which was turned over to us, and they're on patrol assignments. And so until we get through due process, when we find that they've actually committed violations, because some of the cases that we're missing, we begin to find. And so we have to work through that. But the moment we get a recommendation that we believe they're criminal overtones, we're going to move toward reassigning them. And if we have to suspend, we will do that as well.
What in these allegations in the report strikes you if they are proven out as criminal?
I'm sorry?
What in the report, if they prove out in your own investigation, might be or would be criminal?
I think the injuring of public records could be present, and the fact that we have a sworn duty to provide a police service to citizens that we knowingly and willingly failed to do could be a criminal violation as well. And so I won't speculate. I'll wait for the investigation to reveal that and the recommendation from PIB before we move forward. That could be potential violations.
What percentage of the total sex crime related calls were the 1290? Is that compared to the total universe of sex crime related calls received in that 3-year period? Do we know that?
I don't have that answer. We can get that back to you.
The reason I'm asking is, do we know to what extent manpower may be an issue in these findings, where these 5 detectives may have been overburdened? What percentage of the total unit did these 5 detectives represent in terms of the workload and in terms of the total number of officers?
We didn't do that analysis. We do know that at times the strength, the number of detectives in that unit varied from 8 to 9 at various points in the 3-year career.
And they were all in the sex crimes unit, because the first one, Detective A, seems to be handling child abuse cases.
Yeah, that's handled in that unit. As
One was child abuse, the other 4 were sex crimes.
right.
Detective A was child abuse.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chief, we keep talking about the 5 detectives. What about the supervisors that are supposed to be, you know, monitoring their progress and what they're doing and evaluating these cases? What about these individuals and where are they now?
Those supervisors that were moved out before I became chief are in the field working in the patrol bureau. And if this investigation reveals that there's some culpability toward them, we're looking at that as well, because we believe that's why we're building measures of accountability to tell us if the supervisors are actually performing, and we're holding them accountable. If the lieutenants.
Chief, what are you doing to make sure that this isn't the only department where you're having records or reports not being filed properly? So what are you doing to ensure that every department is being, that the work is being done?
So what we're doing is, in talking to all of the assistant chiefs, making sure that every bureau, that the chief all the way down to the newest recruit, that those chiefs know who's performing, who's not, what are the measurements of accountability, how do they know? And so the questions I ask is, how do you know? What is in place to let you know if an officer fails to perform, if a supervisor fails to catch it? So since I came on, that's exactly what we've been building, those measures of accountability to let us know who's doing what, when, where, why, and how.
So are there other probes that might be coming out?
Well, we're constantly doing assessments in the police department to figure that out, to make us a better police department.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.